All right, folks. I'd say we probably start rocking. So maybe what I could start with is a kind of a brief introduction of Grant Ships for anyone that's uninitiated or just want to learn about it. So what we're going to be doing with Grant Ships is Grant Ships is basically a competitive meta grants framework. If I'm to explain it purely in jargon. What it is, it's essentially like there is a central hub, and under that hub is going to be three grant giving entities. Could be any amount, but for the first round, it'll be three, and they all start at the same time and follow the same rules. And they all come up with their sort of like custom thesis or what they would like to allocate towards, and then they essentially compete to allocate to the best projects over time, over a given time period, and then the game stops. And then after that, there'll be a kind of a waiting period, and then what will happen is the DAO will receive an interface with the various projects that they funded and why, and hopefully some updates in the progress of those projects as well. And the DAO will vote using a like token curated registry, sort of similar to it could very well be Joke Race in the first round. And the amount of allocation that those grant ships get in the next round will be proportional to the amount of voting power or votes that they get in that evaluation. So essentially what we want to do is find out what are the best mechanisms or best even just practices for running a grants program, or we call them ships, like a grant ship, and what are and also like to find the talent, right, to see who's really good at engaging with the people that they allocate funds to and finding the best projects. What we try to do is build the application and framework so that it minimizes the amount of overall paperwork and stuff that you're doing, and helps the ship operators or the program managers to focus on just finding the best projects. And it also tracks all that information. We're built on top of Allo, and they have a really robust system for tracking metadata. We're building that into our application so that the record keeping is sort of built into the application, and it's available in public, and anyone can see it, and anyone can use that application to apply for grants as well. It also helps you track your milestones and distribute funds. Another key role in this game is the game facilitators. They're sort of like the referees of the game. What they do is there's at certain steps in the process, they come in and check to make sure that, say, like KYC has been done, and this maybe that like a ship operator isn't giving all the funds to a project that is basically just them or something like that, and they have the ability to either like stop a ship or post notices to the voting community to basically show to show any sort of like rule infractions or anything like that. Any questions so far? That was a lot.
Hey, I have a question.
Yeah, of course.
When does the action stop?
When does the action stop? This is going to be it's still TBD. What we're doing first is like a test round, and so that one might be really fast. Like that could mean like the ship operators have 2 weeks to a month to actually allocate everything, and that's obviously like really fast. But we would design the round and kind of center it in an ecosystem where, like, say, allocating really fast makes sense. But a lot of that is still trying to be discussed, and we're trying to figure out like where in the Arbitrum ecosystem do we fit in best, and trying to even like potentially build partnerships or something like that. But a lot of that is going to be based on feedback we get from you guys as well.
Sounds great. If you need any help in exploring the Arbitrum ecosystem, or let me know.
Absolutely, for sure. Yeah. Any other questions so far?
Can you repeat the timing for the new election, for like the whole thing to
So
start?
can I give you like a blue sky, like we weren't doing a test round? Like we got to test everything out first and do it like run a simple test round, which will probably be pretty short. But ideally, it's like you get 3 months to, 6 months to allocate and then have your projects build and regularly post updates. And then there's sort of the election or judgment day at the end of that. And while that's happening, like we can be bringing on new ships or stuff like that as well. The contracts handle basically allow like creating new grant ship entities and having the facilitators vet them.
Hey, quick mic check. Do I sound all right?
You do, yeah.
Not blowing our ears. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our we're funded by a grant from Plurality right now, and our timeline has us wrapping up development at the beginning of March, and so we want to run the beta round after that, and we're discussing like variables like the duration and how many rounds. But the beginning of March is what we're aiming for, and so we're trying to start this a little early to have you guys understanding what we're doing, giving us feedback on the development as we get to that point. Hopefully we hit our deadline. And so like a lot of the as Jordan alluded to, a lot of the questions we're trying to get feedback and kind of sense the best answer for some of these variables, particularly how to run the rounds. We have 90,000 ARB earmarked to give out in grants. And so we could do that all in one go, give each grant ship 30K. We could do, like 3 rounds and give each grant ship 10K, and then actually do the voting where we have different allocation amounts in subsequent rounds. It would take a little bit longer to do that. But we're just kind of holding those as variables at the moment, and then we'll nail it down at some point and kind of post a nail on the wall and say these are the rules for the first round. But for now, we're sensing and listening.
We're also obviously looking for people who would like to be ship operators, who would like to run around as a grant ship. So that's also very much on our radar, and we're looking for people who feel like they have a thesis that they believe, like if someone were to give them a shot, that they would be able to allocate effectively in a way that would very much like impress Arbitrum voters.
I think I can do that, but is the goal just to impress voters or to actually drive like grant ship the optimal way, in my view?
Well, I think that's a great question, honestly, because there's a bit of we have like one mechanism for deciding essentially what is approved by voters, and that is essentially the vote, right? We would have that sort of token curated registry, but what we want to do is put the data in front of people and have them decide for themselves. So what we're currently building or in talks of integrating with Karma to be able to aggregate their data from all the projects that a ship has funded and aggregate that to each ship. But we'd like to be sort of agnostic about that, and then also bring in the data to our end so that voters have that right in front of them when they're making a decision. So it's kind of a hybrid approach, right? Because as a voter, you can look at the data and decide to go along with that, or you can make your own decision. And I think that's important. Instead of like arbitrarily executing based off of the data. or vice versa, and just voting on whatever you think is your favorite and whatever like the current hype project is.
Yeah, exactly. And FYI, I'm also a program manager funded by PL Lab, so yeah, I know
Very
how it is.
cool. Yeah. We've seen you around. I know you're in the Grant Ships channel as well.
Yeah. I'm really passionate about grants in a way. I don't know if it's passion or I have just like Stockholm syndrome from the Gitcoin rounds because I was the eligibility lead there. But yeah, it's I most grant ships look really interesting to me, especially because it's sort of an evolutionary game in a way. So yeah, it's really
that's what
interesting.
that's what like we're interested in. Like, it's like I when I think of what I would do, I have like certain ideas and stuff like that, but I just want to know. I want to know what ends up being effective, right? And what ends up funding really great projects. I think that's something that really inspired me. I know Disruption Joe posted a lot of posts along these lines way back, probably like in the spring of last year, and that's what inspired us to design and now start building this. Is like we also want to know. Like, I don't think this is a settled science at all yet. You know, this we need to figure this out, and so this is kind of our way of creating a/B test with, you know, some controls around it, so that we can try to like begin to deduce what is effective, and also who, right? Like, I think that's a big part of DAO, because, you know, I think in DAOs sometimes we like to think of it as purely mechanized, but, you know, we kind of ignore the individual sometimes, and, you know, I don't think everyone fits neatly within, you know, these interchangeable roles. You know, we should see who is doing what, and then other people can learn from them and learn their strategies and take that wherever they may.
Yeah. I love your approach. I just don't want to like steal the spotlight here. So I don't
No,
know.
go for it. Go for it.
Uh, yeah, you're most def right. Like in a way, DAOs are not at all automatic. They're most def not mechanized at the moment. I do think decision making is mechanized because yeah, delegates have a limited amount of time, and but overall, there's a lot of stuff to do, research, test, reiterate on, evolve, modify, and like in my view, the biggest plus uh, is to just like what you're doing and like uh, be really serious about it. Don't treat it as like you can treat it like a game, but like a serious game. So because like you're playing with basically people's money, so yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah. Um, the game aspect, like we use the term game because it has that sort of game loop, right? Where, you know, there's essentially like in a game, someone could choose a strategy, something that they think will work, and then they get to see the results of it, and then they get to iterate and adapt over time. Um, you know, I don't necessarily, yeah, it's definitely serious, and I think that's why, you know, we did go initially, like, we were going to build this kind of with like some on-chain parts and off-chain parts, and just kind of get a proof of concept up and running, and then we decided to go like fully on-chain and wrote two pretty sizable allo strategies. And the reason we did that is so we could have the kind of checks and balances in there to help make sure that like there is a process, like a given process, and that we have facilitators in there who can come in and check at any moment. And also, all these roles are done through HATS protocol. So if there's any capture or abuse of these roles, we can put a higher level hat that is there to revoke them, if need be, whether or not that higher level hat sits on top of Arbitrum DAO itself, or say like a security or a multi-sig, or with like a bunch of delegates or something like that. That kind of is still yet to be designed, but it's designed to have those checks in it. But I agree, you know, like this is people's money. It definitely should be taken seriously.
FYI, I didn't, so that came across wrong. Like I was not referring to Grant Ships as being a game, although it is, and I like it. I was just referring to the fact that sometimes when people do grant programs, they may treat them like a game in a way. They just want to allocate the capital, and
Right.
most of the times they don't care how they do that. This was not a comment for like directed towards Grant Ships. So.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah. So is there any questions so far from anyone else, or any comments, things you just want to shout out, or all good? Okay, cool. So I was thinking like would be kind of fun today to if anyone has any ideas. Oh, Tanner. Okay. If anyone has any ideas of how they would run a ship, like a unique strategy, and it doesn't, you don't necessarily have to have one on the spot. I just wanted to get the ball rolling, just something to have in the back of people's mind is like, what would be your unique approach to doing this? Like, I feel like there's this like multitude of ways that you could essentially scope what you fund to provide benefit to the DAO and help with the Arbitrum strategic directives. If anyone here doesn't know what those are, Plurality ran essentially like an open contest almost, where they refined the input from, I think it was something like 15,000 people from the DAO into like 4 very concise strategic directives, which is really cool. And if anyone has a link handy, it would be super cool to post that. But like, I can't run a ship, but there would be a massive conflict of interest. But like, say if I was going to run a ship, I would say, okay, right now Arbitrum has like a lot of funding and a lot of stuff going on. What would I do? Maybe I would go outside of the Arbitrum ecosystem to try to like attract people in to the Arbitrum ecosystem. So I would basically go through, like, depending on my funding amounts, assuming like it would be, you know, the beta round and relatively small, I might go to like a bunch of smaller but popular dApps that are multi-chain. And what I would do is and just create a massive list of those. And I would see what of those dApps are not currently on Arbitrum. And I would say, okay, you know, I've built dApps. I know that once you have the multi-chain functionality, provided you don't have a lot of back-end infrastructure to update, it's relatively straightforward to migrate a dApp from one EVM chain to another. So I would basically go give grants to these you know, mid-sized dApps that get a decent amount of usage to come over to Arbitrum. It would be like if I was, you know, working for like a network streaming company like Netflix or something, and I'm going to get more like content that is original content on other networks and bringing it to Netflix. It'd be the same as like an L2 trying to get as many protocols on Arbitrum as possible. That would be my own little strategy, and I'd post that in the app and for everyone to see so that they know what I'm doing. And I would post updates and try to bring that over. I would even go as far as like, if they don't have someone to build out that functionality and say all their devs are busy, I might even split that funding with, say, like a dev from, I don't know, Raid Guild or something, and get that machine just rolling so that you could just basically pump a bunch of applications into Arbitrum. that would be my personal strategy, and who knows how that would actually pan out when people came to vote on it, but something I thought of. Just a kind of a wacky, crazy idea. I was wondering if anyone has any ideas on hand or just offhand. If not, that's cool. Basically the goal is just to basically get people thinking about what they would do in that situation.
I could share some ideas, although very specific. I think it's worth mentioning. From my understanding, from the little that I lurked around before and listening here now, I see and appreciate the experimental nature of this. So I would invest in ways to make the best of the experiments of like drawing hypotheses, testing them, doing retrospectives, trying to measure impacts, trying to backtrack which actions led to which impact. And one concrete example of doing that is considering using community insights, community intelligence tools like Praise. Full disclosure, I am involved with Praise. It is a public good. It doesn't charge for anything, but even so, it's nice to disclose that. So Praise is a way that anyone can acknowledge a contribution, and then later, different people than the people praised or praising, they check the list of contributions and then measure them, add a weight to them. And like each cycle, for example, like each month or each grant cycle, whatever. And then you can do some data analysis on it. You can run a reputation system that is partially based on it. You can even reward some or all contributions proportionally. So this is just one concrete example of something I think this program should focus, which is making the best out of the experimentation itself, learning as much as possible from them.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We are doing something similar with Karma's GAP system. So Karma has an ability to do a decentralized review process, and it's a series of public attestations, and then you can basically plug in whatever data model you like to. It sounds very similar to basically rank and score these attestations. And I think currently what they're going off of is self-described objectives and whether or not they hit them. But I'm sure that can be expanded out. But we should definitely also check out Praise. I mean, I think the best mode is to aggregate it like many different data sources and let the user pick. I think that would be the like, I don't know if we can get there in the beta round, but long-term view, I think would be awesome to be able to sit there with the ships and the projects and twist and turn some dials and figure out like what you yourself as a voter, what you appreciate, and to be able to have the scoring and ranking algorithms adjust accordingly. Does anyone have any ideas around, or just like...
Marcelo has his hand up.
Oh, okay, sweet.
I think one thing that I would do would be create ways to measure the impact regarding the SDGs by the UN generated by the grantees. So whenever we lay out a new grant for a new grantee, then we'll have like at least expectations about what kind of impact we are expecting them to generate. And also like by having the ways to measure the impact regarding the SDGs, we can also promote a kind of a spirit around monetizing this kind of impact. Because like if we can measure it, then we can turn it into financial assets regarding compensation for SDGs, for decarbonization, etc. So I think like using these traditional methods to measure impact will would integrate the impacts on chain with the traditional methods used by ISSB and IFRS, the international bodies for the sustainable finance something. Sorry.
Gotcha. Yeah, I agree. Impact measurement is important. We definitely, want to plug many modules into it. I again, like, beta round will be basically to make sure it works and functions, but we're going to be piping in some stuff from Karma. We're going to be looking at, I think if you have links to those projects, we should definitely take a peek at them. So if you want to throw that in the chat, that'd be very useful. Very cool.
Curious, have you guys, those that are interested in participating, have you filled out the form on the Grant Ships website? There's a sign up button that kind of just asks you for a bunch of information about yourself. We need volunteers for, to be operators, game facilitators, and we'll have more opportunities like that in the future too. So if you want to get your name in the list, make sure you click that link and sign up. Trying to have a one-on-one convo with everybody that signs up, just so that we can get to know you guys, and everybody has everybody's seeing this Grant's scene from a different angle in every conversation I have. It's like, yep, that's a piece of the puzzle. So definitely want to hear what you have to say, and hopefully we can integrate some of these ideas in as we iterate over time.
Oh, Dan has his hand up. Hey, Dan.
Hey, thank you. Very interesting. I love the idea. I love how you are really building with others and in a very composable way. I love that you integrated Allo, and also that you plan to integrate with Karma Gap. I think both projects are really cool. So I'm reviewing the rules.grandships.fun, how to play.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm checking the kind of like the diagram that you have with game facilitators, grant ships, recipients. I think it will be very helpful, at least for me, to run through kind of like an example. Like if you're asking for volunteers as game facilitators and grant ships,
Mm-hmm.
what how what will we expect to have as responsibilities if we decide to volunteer for any of these things?
So there's, I would say, two very distinct roles. The facilitators and the ship operators. So for ship operators, your goal is basically simply to find and fund great projects, and make sure that they're posting updates, and that they're working in public. And I think that your incentives are also very much aligned with that, because when people have that judgment round, they're going to be looking for updates from that project and to see where they got within that amount of time. For game facilitators, your job is to ensure that the game is running as planned. There's like the contracts can only do so much, and so your job as a game facilitator is to there's one like very concrete role you have, and that's like to make sure that KYC is done, because we've noticed that a lot of the programs in Arbitrum, they have kind of like a soft recommendation, that they do KYC for grants issued above 2,000, I believe 2,000 ARB or US. We have to look into, but over a certain amount that they're KYC'd. So in the app, we're just going to try to have a UI that basically reflects whether or not the recipient address of a grant has been KYC'd. So there's a step in there where the facilitators have to come in and check that. They're also responsible for vetting new grant ships, and vetting the ones that are coming into the game, and basically like making sure that things are going through the contract. Make sure that people go through the right steps. their job is just to make sure that there's no like real abuse of things outside of the contracts themselves. Or even if it's like, we have different modules or different ways to handle that. So say if there's something a ship did, but it could have been a violation of the rules, but it's a very soft violation, and it is more or less like kind of a gray area. We have we call it a yellow flag or a yellow card, and that all that does is it posts the data about what the ship did and say how it was remedied and whatnot, and it gives context to voters come vote time. And then there's the red flag where there is like direct say wrongdoing or maybe repeated infractions or something like that. In that case, that will actually shut down the ship. And so I would say that the game facilitators have a pretty high responsibility to make sure that people are working within the stated rules. Obviously, we'll have to really update those rules and make sure they're very concrete, so that ship operators know how to. And a lot of that will be influenced, say, by Plurality or Arbitrum Foundation, and their job is just to make sure that they're kind of staying within those rules. Just for the record, like, we'd be willing to take on like a facilitator to help us out for the first round. I think we're going to be running facilitators ourselves just for the test round, but ideally, like, we want to pass off those hats to other people in the future, so that it's not us running every round.
Yeah, and one other thing I'll add to that too, that was part of your question. You had mentioned it about being volunteering, and we don't really expect anybody to put their time into it on a volunteer basis. We imagine that every ship would take some sort of a management fee for the people that work within it, just to make that little point.
Mm-hmm. And the fee will be stated up front and in advance.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And now I understand kind of like what are the responsibilities for each of the roles. And I also have a question regarding the allocation strategies themselves. Like, does the ship operator can get kind of like crazy and creative with like allocation strategies, or are allocation strategies? I think, I'm sorry, I was a few minutes late and I missed part of this. But I think that you mentioned something like a token weighted registry. Is that the only strategy? Are there several strategies?
So right now, the token curated registry, we're just going to basically either borrow Joke Race for this round or kind of build our own. That's for like at the end of grant ships, like after the allocation period. That'll be for electing how much, or basically like your funding for the next round will be proportional to how much token or donation token that you received in your registry. So if you're a voter, say you could put 50 points on ship A and 25 on C and 25 on B, and then that's across all voters, and then the amount of tokens that you get for the next round is proportional to how many votes you received. And we're going to basically be mapping off of the delegated ARB token counts in the beginning. For the allo strategies that we're using, so we use two strategies right now, and the high level one is the game manager strategy. And what this is it manages the rules for all the sub strategies, and it also creates new strategies. It creates new ships, basically. Right now, we've only developed the direct. It's basically like a direct funding allo strategy. That being said, we did make the game manager strategy to be generic, so that in the future, you can go into that big toolbox of allo strategies and adapt them to become grant ships. So you could take any, like, I think they have like 15 different allo strategies at present. What we could do is create a new one based off of, say 4 of those that are like really popular. Say if we wanted to do a lightning round strategy or a RFP strategy or quadratic or any of those, and then that allows that kind of pluralistic experiment among different allo strategies. But right now it's just the direct grant strategy. We figured that if we could do one, that would be the one that maps to most use cases.
I just wonder too, is there anybody here that does not know what an allo strategy is or familiar with allo protocol? Because it is a pretty integral part of our kind of the back end of how Grant Ship works, and just want to make sure that if anybody doesn't understand what allo is, that we can kind of make that clear for you.
I could use that. Boiler, it's like you read my mind. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Well, allo basically what it does is controls the allocation of funds to each, at least in our case, the allocation of funds to each ship. So, for example, in this beta round, we have about 90K ARB that is allocated to the grant round. Then for each ship, they would be allocated an equal portion of that, 30K each. And then what would happen as those ships go through their giving out grants, then they will basically make a distribution request. So all of the funds for each ship are basically put into a pool. And when a grant is given out, then it goes to the facilitators for them to approve the distribution of the grant. So allo is kind of the back end that controls all of those functions occurring. And then there can be different strategies, as George was mentioning earlier, that kind of control the distribution points, I guess. So there might be a quadratic round, for example, that the results of the round is how the funds that are allocated are distributed. Does that all make sense?
To piggyback off that too, I'd say I would use the marketing pitch that Allo has as well, where as DAOs, we become very good at accumulating funds and directing them all into one DAO treasury. What the problem that Allo solves is DAOs have a lot of trouble actually getting that funding out in any other ways than just like voting on something with a single proposal. So Allo really excels on creating these custom strategies that are DAO controlled and getting funding out in custom models that you can make. And that's kind of the power of Allo. It comes with it's basically like an allocation framework where you can build off of their stack and take advantage of some of their like central registries and metadata standards, and it's a lot of other really cool tooling, and then build your own custom strategy or use one of the very many that they have in their toolbox. Just sort of like a bird's eye view of Allo, not pertaining necessarily to Grant Ships.
And when you ask about allocation strategies, this strategy is a term used within Allo, but as far as how you approach grant giving and your high level strategy, that's up to the ship. The constraint in the contract for this beta round is you specify how much funds you are going to send to a particular recipient, and then the facilitators have to like click something to like basically approve the allocation to make sure that you're sending it to who you say you're going to send it to. They're not going to judge your strategy or anything. It's just like, is this a legit transaction? And then once that's authorized, then you can send the funds to your recipient. It has a milestone model, so you can have your recipients submit milestones and then pay out each milestone. If you don't like milestones and want to do just one bulk payment, you could just set it up as one milestone and send it all at a click. So trying to keep it pretty non-prescriptive as far as the tech goes. You just get the money on a hair trigger, and then when you click the button, it goes to your recipient when you're ready.
Hey, Thomas Lev, go ahead. You have your hand raised.
Thanks. So my question is, how long the seasons last? And it says here that Grant Ships are supposed to submit a portfolio. Now, I have in mind a certain strategy for Grant Ship that I'm not sure if how to structure this as a portfolio. Like I was expecting that you would look for some kind of metrics. So
Yeah.
can you just explain
So
this?
I tried to update the website this morning, and I guess it didn't push live. I'm seeing, but you won't submit a portfolio exactly. What it is all of the transactions that happen through the course of the round, events are emitted on chain, and so we aggregate those and put them into a feed. So throughout the course of the round, you can at any point post an update that will go into that feed, and then at the end of the game, that feed becomes the portfolio, and that will have everybody who applied, everybody that you approved, all of the funding transactions, any updates that you post, that your recipient posts, the facilitators post. And so those things will be aggregated, and that becomes your portfolio. Now, that is your portfolio, but you can still post updates to kind of give information to the voters, so like you're still kind of responsible for cultivating your portfolio, but you're not going to have to like open up Google Doc and create slides or whatever, like, unless you want to, that's always an option, but the portfolio is really aggregated through the system.
It's more passive now. Like it's kind of the beauty and of Allo and doing things on chain is that hopefully over a few iterations of this round and as we continue building the app, that a lot of this record keeping and spreadsheets and a lot of the stuff that we do becomes on like it indexable on chain, and like as Matt said, it becomes passive, meaning that the record keeping and stuff that you do, it exists on chain, and then it can be presented to the user automatically, and it hopefully will cut out a massive workload for program managers in the future.
Yeah, we've been saying that rather than having program managers live in spreadsheet hell, we want to have record keeping become a passive side effect of good grant giving.
Which is just something like I personally like spreadsheets, right? So but my biggest issue with making
Spreadsheet heaven.
yeah, well, exactly, and that's exactly right. And that's what I like about this is like somebody that makes a bunch of spreadsheets or database or something like that. What they really want is complete data that they don't have to search all over the place for. So that you don't have like all those big, anybody that makes them has those big blanks sort of areas of their spreadsheets. So one thing that I love about this is it kind of aggregates all this data and makes everything standardized. And yes, yeah, go ahead, Dan. You can save me from my nerdiness.
No, that's really cool. I agree. I think it's great to have the information. I think it can be a hell to consolidate and clean the information, but like having the information is awesome. I agree. um, my I'm sorry. I might be repeating my I don't know if myself or repeating someone's or just I might not have gotten something right. So I just wanted to confirm. So you're saying that the allo strategy is kind of like in the smart contracts high level, but the ships can have their own strategy. Is this from the better round or beyond? Just to clarify, my question is, so for example, someone can say, I want to run this. My ship, my idea proposal is running QF on Gitcoin or Giveth, or RPGF for this or that thing, and that will be okay. We could have like different mechanisms since this first round, or it's something that will come later on.
The beta round's going to be very much kind of locked into a specific allo strategy. I mean, but that being said, the high level contract is set up so that it can work with any other allo strategy. It can like spin up a new one. Oh, sorry. Someone asked a question, but I got an alert here. Which one? Sorry.
Thomas, which strategy is it going to be?
That's going to be
the
direct funding strategy. So it's a modified version of that's meant to work with grant ships. But in the future, like the idea is that you can go into or that we will go into any of the allo strategies and modify them and have the game manager be able to deploy those. And so like it's basically like first round we basically have to test. We have to test the app, we have to test the game manager, and we have to test basically like we have to observe, right? We have to observe behavior and how people are interacting with this. And so having a little bit more stricter controls on this A/B test is going to help us kind of just guide us through that process a little bit. That being said, there is still a lot of flexibility within the direct funding strategy, and there's a lot of creativity within those bounds that can happen.
Yeah, and I wouldn't mind wrestling with your question a bit of how could a grant ship using direct funding leverage things like quadratic funding concepts. Because the limitation is you have to have a recipient of your grant, and at some point you have to send them money. And if you had some kind of quadratic funding scheme that you ran apart from this, and then you just said, okay, based on the outcome of this, I'm going to give this recipient money. There's some concerns with KYC. Like we're going to have to know who the recipients are because that's an Arbitrum requirement. I think it's for amounts over 2,000. So like the recipients would still have to apply it through the grant ship system. And, you would still have to kind of designate how much funds you're going to send them and have the facilitators click. But, at the end, there's a pipe where money comes out and it goes to somebody. So if you can live with that constraint that the money has to come out of the pipe and go to somebody, you can really do whatever you want on a social level. And there's even some opportunity, as George was saying, to build alternate strategies. For this beta test, we're not going that far, but you might start to gather the requirements for what these strategies should be, because we really would like the creativity to be the main thing. If you've got some great mechanism for grant giving that is really stifled by that limitation I just described, if money comes out the pipe, let's give some other options, but that would have to be in future rounds.
And that's kind of where that feedback loop cycle comes in. Like if you're an operator or if you're someone that's interested, we want to hear from you, and we want to continue to curate that feedback and help build out, what people think is the optimal strategy so we can test it. And like that's the point of the game. So I feel like, there has to be a really nice pipeline between the operators, facilitators, and us who are building this thing. I think that's really important because testing new things is crucial for this.
it'd be neat if you could do streaming funds and things. Like
Mhm.
Allo has, that's the cool thing about Allo is it uses this strategy pattern. So we'll be able to hook up some different nozzles to the end of the pipe. I
Yep.
guess to take the metaphor a little further.
They do have a proof of concept Sablier strategy. So, I mean, it's awesome. There'll be, you know, this one big repo of different allocation methods, and, you know, you can begin to plug them in. And it's like that. I don't know if anyone saw that show, and it's like in the 90s or early 2000s, like Robot Wars, where you kind of just throw these robots in the arena and you kind of watch them. It's kind of a bit like
But
that.
still,
Right?
still going on, this show.
Is
You can
it?
watch it on Netflix? Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Good to know.
Yeah, I just want to say that I am interested in running a quadratic funding strategy. So if we are able to run this on our own, on the side, and then basically just based on those results of that, give out direct grants. KYC is not direct problem here. This is something that it's not related. Like we solve this on itself. So if that's okay doing this way, then great.
Let's get back to you on that one. We do have some requirements from people that are funding us, and so we got to kind of find a balance between that. One thing that like Matt was mentioning, like a direct funding strategy can just send all the money to something separate, and we can, as facilitators, can vet that. So like the contracts do allow for this. The only thing that you would lose is we got a pretty like robust indexing standard for record keeping. And that is only currently on the contract events that are kind of fired within our own strategies or on, say, like the Allo registry. So what you would lose in that case is the kind of that robust passive record keeping system, and that might be very important to some of the constraints that we have to work in for this test round. But
if I can ask a
yeah.
question here.
Yeah.
So what are the records? Is it like applications, votes from the members of Grant Ship, or what is it?
There's quite a lot. So I guess so it would be from each recipient. They independently create their own project profile. That's like their Allo profile, basically. And then it's all the various information about their own project. And it goes through the process every single time that say like the allocator approved that, or sorry, the facilitator verified that they did their KYC checks and that they're okay to be allocated towards, that creates a record. And then once the, say if you decide to use milestones, in your case, that wouldn't be the case, but if that was the case, then there's a set milestone. So it records all that. And then every single time that the recipient says like, hey, this milestone's done, that creates a record. And then once the ship operator says, sweet, it looks done, I'm going to distribute this portion of the funds to you, another record for that. And there's also records for, say, like all the rejection steps. And we also put fields in so that when you're working within the app, you should provide a reason for, any critical decision point. So we have some generic metadata that can be added to that as well. And what we do is we sequence that over on-chain data and IPFS data, and we provide it all in one graph endpoint. That being said, now as you leave the kind of the Grant Ship sandbox, then we're not able to index basically everything on our subgraph, right? So what would have to happen is like, provided, say, like we are able to do this, which I can't make any guarantees, but provided we are, like that would have to go into the realm of manual record keeping, whether that's providing the on-chain records for within your quadratic round and providing all the context there. Yeah, our calls looks like it's going to end. Okay.